Hi there, Chris.
Hi, Justin. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Good morning.
Thank you. Yes. What is it? No, yeah, good afternoon here and a good evening over there, I think now.
That's right. It is almost 9:30 p.m. where I live on the East Coast. So
Yeah,
yeah. Thank you for joining us this morning,
that's
this
okay.
afternoon, I guess now.
Yep.
We've got a couple minutes, so I think I just promoted you to presenter. So I don't know if
Right.
you're sharing slides, but I think you should be able to now. And we're just gonna go.
Yeah, I've got it. Do you want me to do a little? I can see the button. Do you want me just to make sure it works?
Yeah, sure. Give it a go there.
Yeah, I'll see it. It should be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Does that work for you?
it does.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
Coming through now.
Oh, yeah, there
Yeah.
we go.
So yeah, we can see your slides now. So Justin, I'll really allow you, given the time restrictions, I'll allow you to introduce yourself. And I see we've got over 20 students on now, so that's fantastic. And I just wanted to lay some ground rules for everyone. They've probably heard me on some previous sessions, but basically we just want to, we've got a little more flexibility on the time, so we're going to be a little less stringent as you're the last session. So we want to save lots of time for Q&A, and we'll try to get everyone's questions answered. And
Cool.
so without further ado, and we're also just to let everyone know that OzTREKK representatives as well as representatives from Monash are going to be at their virtual booths. So we'll get your questions answered one way or the other. So Justin, over to you.
Yeah, I'll try to 15 minutes too, because I know that it's a bit later over there now, and I've been talking to a lot of the students through the chat anyway, most likely. So yeah, I guess then I can answer their questions. So cool. So do you want me to share my screen now again? Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yep, I'll just do that. All right, so I might make a start. I can't see the participants list because I'm in presentation mode, but hopefully, Chris, everything's fine to start now. Is that right?
Yeah, fire away. I'll flag any questions, and then we can have a chat at the end.
Terrific. No worries. Okay, thanks everyone for joining me today. I know it's late night over there. It's sort of early morning, mid-afternoon over here in Australia. My name's Justin Burnell. I'm the Student Recruitment Manager International in the Faculty of Medicine Nursing at Monash University. Some of you I may have spoken through the chat system already. You may not have had a chance to speak to me yet. So I might just get started because I've only got about 15 minutes and I've got a lot of different content to get through with you. Because something that's unique about Monash, if you're thinking, medicine at Monash, medicine in Victoria, something that's unique. We actually have two program, which means you can actually enter medicine direct from high school, and we also have a graduate entry program, which means you would need to complete, your undergraduate degree in Canada, for example. And then enter that way. So we're a little bit different. So you'll have to hang in with me a bit through this session because some of you will be coming from high school, and then others, will have maybe be completed a bachelor degree. So there'll be a bit of different information, but just hang in there because there is a bit of crossover as well. Why Monash? We've got a really extensive range of clinical partners and placements. That's what we pride ourselves on, placing New Year's time into, places like the Monash Medical Centre in Alfred. We're also very strongly ranked, so a sign of reputation, brand. For medicine, we're ranked number 30. So think about, your first year where you've got to do the dissection and all those sorts of things.
Justin?
As well.
Justin?
I talked about, range of clinical placements and partners. So one thing you might not know, we're actually building a hospital on our. Yes, Chris. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but your video and your audio is really lagging.
Can you hear me?
I've gotten a couple messages from the attendees, and I was wondering, could you re-log in to the session and see if that helps with your signal?
Can you hear me there, Chris?
A little bit, but not well. We're struggling to hear you, and you're freezing up as well in the video.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was wondering if you could log out and maybe come back in.
Yeah, sure. So go through, just click out of Zoom and go back in.
Sorry, folks. It's actually the first technical difficulties we've had from Australia from all of the schools, unfortunately for Justin. Can everyone hear me okay and see me okay? Just if someone could drop me a line on the chat. Yeah, okay, perfect. I'll just wait for Justin to log back in. Hopefully that'll be good. Wish I had some magic tricks or a joke or something to hold everyone over, but I've got nothing. I should bring my dog. No, I won't do that to you. How has tonight, have I visited Monash? I had a question from Susa. Yes, I have. Cool campus, cool city, world-class medical school. Yeah, it's got it going on for sure. Hi, Justin.
Can you hear me there, Chris?
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Is that? Do you think it's not as freezy now, or?
We'll give it a go. I'm hopeful,
Okay.
but I can hear you and see you. Okay, so
Okay.
So
I'll share the screen again and just start from the start again.
Okay.
It's not allowing me to share screen though now. Okay. How's that, Chris? Am I lagging now, or is it okay?
So far, so good.
Okay. All right. Well, we might try again. Second time lucky. We'll see how we go. I mean, I'd only been going for about 2 minutes, so I might just sort of start again, just because I'm not too sure how much of the content the students would have heard. So yeah, thank you for joining this session. Apologies for the connection issue there. I've rejoined and hopefully you can hear me a bit more clearly now. My name's Justin Burnell. I'm the Student Recruitment Manager for International in the Faculty of Medicine, Nursing and Health Sciences at Monash. So I'm here today to talk to you a bit more about our medicine program. So we don't offer dentistry, so I'm just going to talk to you about medicine. One thing I would say is we're a little bit different to a lot of the other universities. We're a bit more unique in that we actually offer 2 different medical programs or 2 different medicine entry points. One of those is direct entry, which means students can come direct from high school and study to be a doctor without having to do a pre-med course. The other option is for students who may have already completed an undergraduate degree or are completing an undergraduate degree in biomedical sciences in Canada, for example, and they will do what's called the graduate entry program. So we are the only university in Victoria to offer a direct entry medicine, which makes us a little bit different to some of the other unis. It also means that some of you will have to hang in there with this presentation because some of you will be interested in direct entry medicine and others will be interested in graduate entry medicine. But there is a little bit of crossover given that the courses are both Bachelor of Medical Science and Doctor of Medicine degrees. Just some other sort of, key points about Monash, some sort of, value propositions. We do have we pride ourselves on our really extensive range of clinical partners and placements. Obviously with medicine, there is a certain component that is theoretical, but, a fair proportion of your course will be spent in the hospital system, and we've got really strong links with hospitals like the Alfred and the Monash Medical Centre, to name a few. And I'll talk about that in a bit more in a moment. And also our rankings. So in the world, a sign of reputation and brand, and the research that we do, we've got medicine, we're ranked number 31 in the world. And then anatomy and physiology, so that's a strong component of your degree as well, number 30 there. Something you may not know that's quite impressive, we're actually building a new hospital on our campus, our Clayton campus. So, whether you're doing direct entry medicine or graduate entry medicine, this will be beneficial. It's going to be the leading cardiac or heart hospital in Australia. It's under construction at the moment, due for completion in 2022. And this, further sort of supports our clinical placements and our networks that we have, because it gives students more opportunities to do placements when you eventually come on campus. Some of the questions I usually get is, where will I do my placements? What about overseas, sort of opportunities? So you can see on this sort of table here that the placements are divided into sort of central schools, regional or rural locations, but there's a huge amount of different hospitals that we place students into. There is some opportunities to do an overseas placement. It's quite competitive, and they're limited, and you usually do them in your final year. You can see some of the partner institutes there on the right-hand side in the overseas column. So we partner with King's College, the National University of Singapore. They're very highly ranked. Karolinska in Sweden is a very massive, medical school. We also have a campus in Malaysia at Monash, which is really good. So students, have the opportunity to do potentially some placements in some hospitals in Malaysia as well. The pathway to becoming a doctor, usually you can see there at the top, you kind of go through your medical school, which can either be direct entry or graduate entry. It can either be what's called an MBBS, which is a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, or it can be something like an MD, which is what we offer, which is a Doctor of Medicine. There's not too much difference there, apart from some of the content in the course and the recognition around the world. Students often say to me, if I come to Monash, can I specialise in cardiology, or can I specialise as a surgeon, or can I specialise in dermatology? That sort of happens further down. So we can see down the bottom here, you need to kind of go through the process first, get your degree, do the internship. So the internships are never guaranteed because it's done through the hospital system. So it's not Monash University or the Australian universities placing you into the internship. You go through a computer matching system when you've finished your degree. So domestic students are usually given first priority, and then international students studying in Victoria. So we do have a lot of international students from Monash that will do their internship in Australia, but we just can never guarantee it because it's not us actually placing you into the internship. But then, further down the track, you'll have the further training that you need to become, a specialist in a particular area. So the career of a doctor, it's really, the course might be 5, 6 years, 7 years, depending on your background, but to actually specialise can take anywhere up to 10 to 12 years with further training. All right, so let's get into the courses. As I mentioned earlier, there's two courses that we offer. So this is the first one. We call it direct entry. It is a Bachelor of Medical Science and a Doctor of Medicine. So it's what we call a vertical double degree. You get 2 qualifications when you graduate. This one is a 5-year program. So students, this course is only available to students that come direct from high school. So you might be studying the Canadian High School Diploma, and you are commencing no more than 2 years from when you finished high school. So for example, if you finish high school and then decide not to do anything for a couple of years, you wouldn't be eligible for this course because it's only for high school students that have completed or commenced within 2 years. You also cannot transfer into this course. So you can't start another course and do a year of another course and then transfer into this course because it's purely for high school leavers. It's offered at our Clayton campus, and there's 2 prerequisites, which are chemistry and English. The selection criteria for this course, students will often say, what high school grades do I need? How do I get to interview? There's actually 3 selection criteria for this course. So it will be your high school results. You'll notice there I've only put the A levels and the IB just because they're a bit more sort of global. Of course, we do accept the Canadian diploma scores, and I'll put those on the screen in a moment. So that's criteria 1. You need to have sort of strong high school results. The criteria 2 is what we call the ISAT. So that's the International Student Admissions Test. That's very important because we select students for interview based on the ISAT. And number 3 is the interview. So to get to the interview, you need what we call the multiple mini interview, the MMI. So each of these 3 criteria, they're actually ranked evenly. So they're worth 1/3. So if you get to the interview stage, your interview score is worth 1/3, your ISAT score is worth 1/3, and your high school results are worth 1/3. So for that reason, we don't have cutoff scores. Students will often say to me, what's the Ontario high school diploma cutoff score? We might have a minimum that you need to meet, but we don't publish a cutoff score because it depends on how you rank relative to other applicants based on the 3 criteria that I've just described. We have, this sort of gives you a bit of an idea of the volume of students that we have. So we have probably, 700 students apply for the direct entry medicine course. Of those 700, we can't interview 700. That would just be logistically too many students to interview. So we interview about 200 of those students, and then we have 70 places for international students in our direct entry medicine program. This is what I was talking about earlier, the 3 stages of selection, or the 3 criteria. So we talk about year 12, and I've tried to put some of the scores that you'll need as a minimum if you were studying in Ontario or British Columbia, Alberta or Nova Scotia. So you can see it's obviously, above 90%. You would probably need to be achieving much higher than that, because we saw how many applicants we have and how many we interview. To give you a better ranking, you probably need to be getting a higher score, but as a minimum to be considered, that's what you would need. The ISAT worth 1/3, and the multiple mini interview is worth 1/3. What is the ISAT? Just in case you haven't heard of it, it's basically an aptitude test. It's not a Monash test. It's actually run and administered by a separate company called ACER. That's ACER. It's a very important test though, because we select you for interview based on your ISAT score. So you can see there down the bottom, you'll need a score of at least 170 or above, with a minimum of 165 in both of because it's divided into 2 sections. So, kind of irrespective, I suppose, of your high school grades, you really need to have a strong ISAT to make sure you can get to the interview stage. And then when we invite you for interview, then we'll take into the 3 criteria, or weighted evenly, that I described earlier. So ISAT is very important. It's also very important that you know when to sit the ISAT. So typically, we will, although we haven't confirmed the dates for 2022 entry just yet, if we refer to or use our dates from 2021 entry as a rough guide, we usually interview international students in 2 different times of the year, in July or in November. So if you want to be considered for the July interviews, to give you more chance, I suppose, or to be interviewed earlier, you really need to be sitting ISAT very early in the year, either in cycle 1, which is now passed, just recently passed, or cycle 2, which would be the 30, in May, up to the 31st of May. So you need to try and sit the ISAT as early as possible, is what I would always encourage you to do. You could sit the ISAT in August this year if you're applying for 2022, but that would obviously be too late for our July interviews. Obviously, if we haven't got an ISAT result by July, we can't consider you for interviews in July. We could consider you for interviews in November with some of the other international students later on in the year, but by then some of the places have already gone. So it's probably in your best interest to try and sit the ISAT as early as possible. Remember, these ISAT dates, they've only got 4 cycles now each year, so you need to sort of go to their website and make sure that you've registered and understand a bit about the test, so that you're prepared accordingly to do your best in that particular aptitude test. What about the interview? So, if you've got a strong ISAT, we will invite you for interview. Interviews are actually usually held in person. In person, I mean face-to-face. We will come to Canada and do the interviews face-to-face. With the situation that we're in at the moment, we can't obviously do that. So this year what we did, last year, was the first time we actually did the interviews via Zoom. So it's still a multiple mini interview. It's not a one-on-one interview where we're asking you why you want to be a doctor, or, those sort of typical interview type questions. We're actually assessing you more on things like communication, what your motivation is, how you critically think, do you show empathy, how you would, work as a team or collaborate, and some advocacy. So you can say it's more like a little speed dating session. When we say multiple mini interview, it's because you actually go to different stations and you'll spend 10 minutes at a particular station, and you'll be given a scenario, or 8 minutes. You've got a 2-minute turnaround. And that's the sort of style of interviewer. So it's a little bit different maybe to some of the other interviews that you might have done for other courses or during school. So that's just something to take into consideration if you get to the interview stage, which is very important. When to apply if you're in Canada. So I often get this question. So I kind of discussed this earlier. So let's say you're completing your high school this year, in 2021. You really want to be applying by, early June 2021. You can apply later. It's just that, as I said, you may not be considered for the interviews until the November round. So if you want to be considered for July interviews, then you need to sit the ISAT early in 2021, ideally in the January or the May sitting. And then the invitations to interview, they'll usually go out late July. And if you're successful, you may have an interview in July, or you may have that interview in August. And then we hope to make some offers, in August as well. So you could find out if you're successful for 2022 in August, September, around about that time. And then you'd be looking to commence in February 2022. Of course, this timeline, it's a bit sort of early. I've just tried to give you some rough ideas. It is a bit subject to change, especially with what's happening, at the moment around the world.
Justin?
Yes, Chris?
I just thought I'd slide a question in that's appropriate.
Sure, that's good. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, to this slide. So Thomas Hatfield has a question. How many IMG applications for grad entry do you typically get, and for how many spots? Have any idea?
Okay. So I'm just about to go into grad entry now. Yeah. So I might cover that. So he just wants to know how many applicants we have and how many spots. Yeah, sure. I'll get into that one. Sorry, guys, it's a bit confusing because we're like I said earlier, we've got 2 medical programs. So sometimes I know a lot of you won't be interested in direct entry medicine, then others, will be interested in graduate entry medicine more. So I finished with the undergraduate medicine, or the direct entry medicine now. And I'm just going to quickly go through our graduate entry medicine program for those, in Canada that have already finished an undergraduate degree. So I'll start from the start. So this one here, it's the same qualification. It's a Bachelor of Medical Science and Doctor of Medicine. So it's a MD qualification. The difference is this one takes 4 years to complete, whereas the direct entry takes 5 years. The reason why this one takes 4 years is because the understanding is you can complete the bachelor in a related area. So we require that you've actually done a bachelor degree with a biomedical science, with a significant amount of biomedical science. So something like pharmacology, genetics, immunology, microbiology, anatomy, biochemistry. Your undergraduate degree would have to have that content. So you couldn't have done a Bachelor of Arts with a major in journalism and apply for our course, for example. The reason why we have that requirement is because we don't, unlike other universities, we don't have an MCAT and we don't have a GMAT requirement for entry. So we need to know that students already have that solid understanding of biomedical science as they're entering the course, because we're not going to teach that in the course as such. You'll still do a year of human anatomy, but we need to know that significant background in place. So that's why this one's 4 years. The academic record, so you usually need a GPA of about 6.0 out of 7 minimum to be considered for interview. So the 2 selection criteria for this one is, because there's no MCAT or GMAT, it's the GPA plus the what we call multiple mini interview and a situational judgment test, which is kind of done at the same time as the multiple mini interview. This one's located at the Churchill campus, but you really only do 1 year on campus anyway, and the remaining 3 years are in the hospital system that we spoke about earlier. That GPA, as I understand, I looked on OzTREKK's website, and I believe that usually converts to about a 3.3 out of 4. So just something to keep in mind, but you may need a higher GPA. Now for this course here, to answer the question that we received from the student, we actually only have 20 places in graduate entry medicine each year. So it's significantly less, only 20 places each year. And that's students applying from, all around the world for international students. We have about 400 applications, and I believe we interview anywhere between 100 to 120 students. So again, it's always competitive because we would love to be able to have more students, in the course, but we need to be able to place all the students. So that's why we've always got so few places in the medical programs. And the other thing is we offer 2 medical programs, so we need to place 70 students at the undergraduate level, and then a further 20 students at the graduate entry level into the program. So I hope that answers your question. 20 places each year, and the selection criteria is based on the GPA, but you need to get to interview. So the interview, we will shortlist for interview based on students' GPA in their undergraduate degree. The GPA is all of your subjects undertaken. So if you've failed units, we will include those in the GPA. It's basically, a straightforward average of all the units you've done divided by, the scores that you've received, or the other way around, I should say. So this is typically what it would look like. In Canada, you might have done 3 years of biomedical science. It doesn't necessarily have to be biomedical science, of course. It could have been something like a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Physiotherapy, or, there's various degrees. It just will assess that you've got a strong biomedical science, content when you come into the course. So, typically you would have done 3 years, and then you've got 4 years of medicine. So really, the preclinical happens, in first year. Then really the remaining 3 years will be clinical in the hospital system through the clinical network partners that we talked about a bit earlier. This kind of puts it side by side and sort of shows you the difference between the direct entry and the graduate entry. So the direct entry, you come in straight from high school and doing your 5 years, whereas, it sort of shows you the different progression, I suppose, if you were doing the graduate entry, which a lot of you will be interested in because you've already done a degree in Canada. So this one here, this sort of summarises what I was describing earlier. So really, if you are successful in getting to the interview and the situational judgment test, which I'll talk about in a moment, the multiple mini interview, we actually weight that at 60%. So that's worth 60%, and your GPA is worth 40%. So you can see, even though the minimum is 6.0, that doesn't obviously guarantee you'll get an interview. You kind of need to, still have a strong GPA. We'll look at students that are, 6.0 and above, but obviously it's in your best interest to try have a higher GPA because it'll make you more competitive, in the selection when we get to that stage, given that we have so few places, only 20 places. But those 20 places, 50% of them each year are probably Canadian. So, even though you're probably thinking, oh God, 20 places for everyone around the world, the Canadian cohort that we have, it's very strong. We did a webinar probably late last year, and we had 3 of our Canadian students talking about how they were learning online this year because they've been disrupted. And there's a really sort of, tight community. We probably get 3 or 4 from Singapore students because they've got a very strong sort of medical, background a lot of the time. And then the remaining places are kind of scattered countries around the world. You can kind of get students from Europe, students from South America, so students from Southeast Asia, given that we're so close to Southeast Asia. So that should give you some idea of the demographic of the student that we have in the course as well. This one here is a bit more about the situational judgment test. As I said, this one's a bit different because you don't do this at direct entry level, but it's just an additional Monash test that we do at the same time as the multiple mini interview. So you'll do the multiple mini interview, and then either before or after the multiple mini interview, you'll sit the situational judgment test. It's just an online test that Monash runs. Again, it's scenario based. So there's no real right. You'll be given a scenario, and then you've got a sort of set of numbers, and you've got to sort of respond to that scenario, and you give it a rating or a ranking as what you think is most appropriate in that scenario or what is least appropriate. So sometimes, there might be an ethical issue in there, and they're just trying to see how you think, because obviously being a doctor, they want to understand that you've got some compassion, some empathy. So it's all sort of something to complement, I suppose, the multiple mini interview, and find out a bit more about your personality to go with your, your book smarts that you've got as well. So that's about all I had. I'm not sure if that was 15 minutes or not. I might just stop sharing my screen because then I can actually see the questions that you have, or answer or address any questions that you've got. Do you reckon that's a good idea, Chris? Should I do that or just leave this
Yeah,
up?
no, I think that's good. But there was a couple questions, like you went over the SJT. There was a
Yep.
question, is it similar to the Casper? And that's really the only other question, along with the number of spots for grad entry.
Grad entry, yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I believe Casper it's used in education programs, is that right? Like teaching?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I don't
Yeah,
want
my
to,
understanding was it's not as formal as Casper, I don't think, because I think Casper, I'm not too familiar with Casper, but I've got colleagues that work in that area and I've heard them talk about Casper before. It's really just, it's a bit similar to the multiple minute interview, except there's not someone interviewing you, asking you the question as such. So I think that's the major difference. So think of multiple minute interview, you're given a scenario.
Yeah.
And you've got 8 minutes to talk about that scenario and you've got to answer the scenario. Whereas the situational judgment test, it's just an online, so it takes away that human interaction, but you've got time to read a situation, you've got to respond to that situation, and you've just got to give it an appropriate, what you think is appropriate. So it's like a tick box type scenario.
Sure. So we've had a question about extracurriculars for direct entry.
Yeah.
It's always just such a big deal here in Canada. The extracurriculars are so carefully combed over. It's a bit of I think part of it's cultural, perhaps, I don't know, but there's definitely less importance placed on it in Australia in general. What's it like at Monash?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when I do speak to students, when I used to be able to go to Canada or overseas, I get asked that all the time, especially at the international schools. And, because they would be comparing us to the US institutions or the UK institutions. It's a lot different. We sort of, we tell you what you need. We'll publish, what score you need in your high school diploma. And that's really what we use, those 3 criteria. What I would say, though, is I wouldn't, although we don't formally assess extracurricular activities, those sort of things will probably come in handy when you get to the interview stage. Because as I said, you've got to draw on experiences. It might be voluntary things that you've done that you can bring up that helped you with communication. So although it's not, I guess, formal, it's certainly, activities that will help you, especially in the interview stage, because they're sort of the less, academic type assessment, that we go through. So yeah, I mean, we're probably similar to a lot of the other Australian universities in that we don't really formally assess them or ask for them. Because we've got a pretty rigid process already as it is, with the 3 stages and the weighting for the direct entry medicine program.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that certainly consistent with our understanding. My colleague Kaylee, who I didn't realize was on the chat tonight. Thank you, Kaylee. Just put a shout out to the Casper. It's basically part of teaching applications. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, I thought it might have been. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Kaylee. Appreciate that. So yeah, Justin, I think like in terms of, thank you. That was a really good overview of both programs. So, we've got quite a few students. Thank you for providing your contact info as well.
That's all right.
We've got quite a few students enrolled in your medical program.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
they really like it. And Monash is a really impressive global leader in research and healthcare in general. So a really good option to consider. And I want to thank Justin for giving us a really good overview this evening and making time in a busy day in Melbourne. So yeah, cheers.
No, thanks for everyone for joining. I know it's late over there now, and I know the connection wasn't great at first. So yeah, my email's there. Feel free to contact me directly, because I know things change as you progress through the year, especially if you're in high school. I know for some of the students already at university, they've probably got things under control, but yeah, just feel free to contact me directly if you've got any questions, and I'll do my best to help you out.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. And thank everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. It's been a really great evening here in Canada. So thanks to everyone. Appreciate your involvement.
No problems. Bedtime for everyone over there. Nearly.
Exactly. Okay. Look forward to meeting
Okay,
you in
see you
person,
later, guys.
Austin.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers.